Gentlemen, welcome back to another video. My name is Striker. Now, this video, I'm going to recommend a book to you guys, which I think is interesting. Now, if I ever come across something that I think is interesting or that's going to be useful for you guys going over to Ukraine to do some dating, whether it's self-improvement or whatever it is, then I will recommend it. Okay, so this book here, I think it's interesting, right? And I'm going to tell you why that is. So, well, I'll tell you this first, okay? So we're on a call a few weeks ago with one of our clients, and he mentioned that he was reading this book. And I'd recommended books for him to read, and he had read them all. And it was brilliant talking to him because he was he'd done some analysis of himself, and he was happy to learn some more skills, is probably the best way to say that, going forward. So it was great. He mentioned that he was reading this book, and the name of the book is Bang Ukraine. And when we were on this call, Luba started reading out like a paragraph that she was in another location, and it was pretty graphic about this guy who was like basically having sex with a woman that he'd met in Ukraine. And I thought, this is not going to be a good book. This is like something of a sex tourist that's come over that's sharing his life of banging Ukrainian girls, right? But I had an open mind about it. And I thought, I'll read it. It sounds like it could be quite interesting. I didn't realize at the time it was by Roosh V. So he was sort of like I guess maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. He was sort of like the guy that would travel. He was sort of like one of the OG PUA sort of pickup guys. But one thing I'll say about this book, right? And if you are sort of in your 20s or 30s, maybe early 40s, this is a pretty good book to read. I was impressed by his perception of Ukraine. Now, it is kind of a graphic, well, I wouldn't say graphic, but it does go into some detail. And if you just read those parts, you'd think this dude's just pretty much a sex tourist. And in my eyes, he's a sex tourist. So I don't know if he really identifies as well. And I think he kind of likes to say that he's not, from what I've read, but in my eyes, he is the definition of a sex tourist. He has now turned to God, okay? So now he's like this religious dude, whatever. Doesn't really matter. But his perception of Ukraine when dating, but also just what's around him, the economy, even the landscapes, they're pretty bang on. And he gives you pretty straight up advice that I think is actually pretty valuable if you're coming over by yourself and you're not really interested in, well, no, if you are interested in forming a relationship, you can, but trying to understand some of these things from someone who's actually gone out there and done it. So I recommend to read this book, even if you're an older guy, still read it as well. And if you have been over to Ukraine, if you read this book, you'll be going, I get it. Like, I was laughing like when some of the stuff he was talking about, like the food and how some of the women are, like their demeanors, I suppose you could call it, or the way they are towards men. It is pretty accurate, but in saying that, I've had experiences like he had, but I've also had experiences which are complete opposites in a good way. So yeah, read the book and you'll kind of know a little bit more about what I'm talking about. So it was written about, I think it was about 8 or 9 years ago. Let's just say 10 years ago, his experience was. So times were different 10 years ago. And now there's another generation that's coming through of women that have a different mindset, right? So you have to allow for that as well. So don't take it all as gospels. That's the way that it was. But it's even interesting in the way that that's what his experience was 10 years ago, which I do think is going to be pretty accurate. And because it was 10 years ago, the influence of social media obviously is not as present as what you might see in some. If the book was written today, it would be a lot different, right? Than back then, with things like dating apps and stuff like that. But he goes into a bit of detail about how he, rents apartments and how he, what's it like going to nightclubs and his experience. All of that stuff it's interesting to sort of try and understand what it would have been like to do this 10 years ago. So don't generalize the whole of Ukraine by this book. But it is a very interesting book if you are looking to go over to Ukraine. Definitely a good read. So just thought I'd make a quick video about it. Definitely read it. Now it is, I don't believe you can buy it anymore. So I guess when he went all religious and realised the error of his ways, he took it down maybe. But everywhere I've looked, it just says it's out. But it's pretty easy to find it for free. And if you have read it, or if you do read it, put something in the comments and let's discuss what your thoughts were of this book. I'll see you guys next time.